Kaiju, giant monsters, strange beasts. Throughout all of our history, these creatures of legend have ravaged humanity. Some have brought doom to us, others have saved our kind. And today, I would like to highlight one of the thousands of kaiju from our popular culture, going over who they are, their story, their real-life history, and more. I'm your host, Minecraft World, and this is Let's Talk Kaiju. Episode 5, Titanicus. Spoiler warning. You have been warned. The year was 2017. The kaiju genre had just taken in the successes of Godzilla 2014, Shin Godzilla, Kong Skull Island, and Pacific Rim, and the genre was slowly but surely re-entering a new golden age. And alongside the new media recognition, the merchandise became near inescapable. Kind of. Whilst proper toys of the kaiju were flying off the shelves, the movie Monster Series line from Bandai, the premier kaiju figure creator for collector and figures, was, for all intents and purposes, dead. And that caught the attention of a certain Mac McClintock, who grew a general frustration at all of this. So, he decided to do something about it. And with the design expertise of Dope Pope and the artistic capabilities of Brendan Purchase, among others, Mac crafted a brand new world, all starting with a kaiju figure and an alternate history tale about one of the world's greatest tragedies. And Mac would ultimately name the kaiju Titanicus. The year is 1912. The Titanic is cruising across the North Atlantic after having set out on its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York City. It had previously received many warnings of icebergs, all of which it had ignored. But when what at first appears to be an especially large iceberg rises from the sea and begins unleashing its fury on the ship, they realize they've just encountered the legendary Titanicus. Meanwhile, in the modern day, Titanicus returns, rising out of the ocean and towering above a building and looking down to a city that fears it. Titanicus' story was recounted in a mini-comic that came with the figure of him, which stood at 6 inches tall and 12 inches long. It had 4 points of articulation and was mostly a medium gray with near white sections, mainly the armoring on the front and the back spines. Titanicus had a somewhat limited release with both the 6-inch figure and a larger 30cm statue, which featured the same paint, but had its mouth closed. And with its release, Titanicus captured the attention of several across the kaiju genre. And with that, Mac & Co. continued to develop their world, creating the company called Titanic Creations. Shortly following the release of Titanicus, they announced and released their next few kaiju. They started with their second benevolent one, Nosferodon, a created organism from outer space that crashes into a farmhouse in Germany, later being encountered by a young boy named Wolfgang, whom he soon forms a close bond with. Next was Titanicus' mortal enemy, Scoraeus, an Egyptian superweapon that consists of the head of a serpent and the body of a scorpion, able to spit a searing acid that melts anything to the bone in seconds. And finally, Nosferodon's mortal enemy, Griffixus, an extraterrestrial pathogen in the vague shape akin to that of the griffin, that takes control of any living organism it comes across and consumes their DNA and wishes to conquer and consume every world that it comes across. And with this, the gears were in motion as Mac and the rest of the Titanic Creations crew continued to develop their world, prepping for the ultimate culmination of their creations. However, Titanicus was not left out during these developments. While the rest of the monsters were being developed on the character front, Titanicus received a plethora of figures, starting off with a repaint of his original figure, released shortly before Griffixus. This repaint was a slight bit more detailed than the original figure, giving it a slightly darker skin color, and adding a blue gradient to the spines, as well as a slight bit more detail in the mouth. Alongside this, Titanicus would receive multiple repaints exclusive to G-Fest, a yearly convention celebrating all things Kaiju. There were 3 different solid color repaints, one in neon green, one in neon blue, and one in neon pink. Alongside this, there were also 2 more detailed exclusives, one being pink and purple colored, and the other being blue and green colored. And later, TC would release a plushie of Titanicus, designing it after the character's original color scheme. If you wish to support Mac McClintock and the people at Titanic Creations, there's a link to their website in the description. This episode is not sponsored by them. I'm just a fan who wishes to spread the word of an independent company. Finally, after much anticipation, TC would release the culmination of what was set up by their figures. Titanic Creations' Soul War. The year is 1942. The Second World War rages on as a young Wolfgang, with the help of Nosferodon, is on a desperate search for his parents, who have been taken away by the Nazis for hiding a group of Jews. But that quest is very swiftly changed when a very hungry Griffixus arrives on Earth. Meanwhile, in Cairo, Egypt, the infamous General Erwin Rommel digs up the seal that entombed Scoraeus, and uses it to awaken the beast for his own nefarious purposes. And in the middle of the Atlantic, Titanicus reappears after a 30-year-long absence, sending Serenity, a government organization dedicated to hunting and studying these creatures, which they dubbed cryptids, into a frenzy. Soul War, upon release, was very well received, being praised primarily due to its uniqueness, putting the kaiju in a setting that hasn't been explored all that much, and telling a surprisingly strong story about humanity and the nature of evil, all whilst keeping the spirit of a lot of classic and some modern kaiju stories, giving their characters far more life than was previously there. During the creation of and following the release of Soul War, Titanic Creations would look to expand their world by delving into the branch of licensed figures. In 2022, it was announced that they had acquired the license for the 1961 British Kaiju Gorgo, and were planning to make 2 figures of her, as well as a comic and a potential animated movie. The first figure was of her depiction in the movie itself, with the figure itself being a crowdfunded effort with certain stretch goals in between, like a breakable Big Ben and a baby Gorgo. The figure would ultimately ship in October of 2023, with them later releasing a repaint based off of the Steve Ditko Gorgo comics, as well as a 30cm tall statue of the movie version. And shortly after that, they announced Gorgo Legacy, a prequel comic taking place in the same universe as Soul War, set to release in June of 2024. Alongside Gorgo, TC has also acquired the license for both Yongari and Pulgasari, the South Korean and North Korean kaiju respectively, with plans to release figures of them both in the same way as Gorgo, with different stretch goals for both of them. As of writing this, the crowdfund pre-order for Yongari is currently ongoing, slated to finish on June 30th. As for Pulgasari, the pre-order for him is set for June 18th. And finally, as for Titanicus himself, Titanic Creations has plans for an articulated figure of the character at the same scale as the rest, planned to come with an ice beam effect and a broken tugboat. And if the figure succeeds, it is possible that Titanicus may return to the page, or even appear on the screen. But whatever comes next for Titanic Creations, it is very clear that the Beast of the Atlantic is not quite out of the picture yet. Wherever he shows up next, it is guaranteed that destruction will befall whomever crosses his path. I have been your host, Minecraft World, and this has been Let's Talk Kaiju. Thank you for joining me for this 5-part event. Take care. Peace!